Dobar dan. That means good day. This is TalkCast PDX. You can find us on the web, talkcastpdx.com. It's Tuesday, December 28th. The name of the show is The Bogdanich Perspective. I'm your host, Paul Bogdanich, and welcome. It's episode number 41. The title of today's show is Boxed, B-O-X-E-D, as in boxed in. It snowed in Portland, and it does that about once a year, twice a year sometimes, and the city takes the tack that rather than buy plows to keep all the major streets clean and so on, because it only happens once a year, they just shut the city down. So we are doing this remote. Other than the graphic, there will be no visual. And it'll be a relatively short episode because it's the end of the year. But so let's get into it. I mentioned last episode, then the episode before that I am a member of TalkCast PDX, and as a member of TalkCast PDX, I'm on their channel. And if I say anything that runs afoul of the discussion rules on any of the platforms, not only do I get my show canceled, but I get the other shows canceled. And, they have a variety of cooking shows and, it being Portland, the marijuana shows, the lifestyle shows, and they're good shows. And I can't, they don't violate the rules, so I'm not going to either. But that limits what I can say. But what I can say is this. In terms of the market, I think the major events in 2022 are going to have to do with the pandemic response. I would note that when they did the initial pandemic response, they did so in 2020, and there was no data. To be fair, nobody knew how much of a threat the virus was or wasn't, how contagious it was or wasn't, and so on. But they had to do something. The political pressure was just enormous. And so, they did something, and they went with the warp speed program and all the rest of that stuff, and kind of de-emphasized early treatment and prevention. But it's 2 years later. I can only characterize the response in 2020 as very aggressive. But it's 2 years later now. It's December of 2021, and we have 2 years of data and studies, and all these scientists working furiously to trying to, and they've discovered the mechanisms of action. They've discovered the cellular level mechanisms of action and so on. So there's a great deal more data now. But the response back in 2020, you can only characterize it as very aggressive. And I would point out that it was only possible because of their ability to print money. In all prior emergencies, whether they've been war, flood, famine, whatever, they always had to be constrained, and you had to do a cost-benefit analysis in between keeping the society healthy and the tax base healthy and the economy going versus whatever emergency it was that you were trying to deal with at the time. And this is kind of the first one where that doesn't apply. They just printed the money. And so that made the character of this response unique. It happened in the beginning of 2020, which was a presidential election year. The system was terribly divided at that time in between principally two different political camps. But because they were not forced to come together to compromise, to create an effective strategy that was acceptable to both sides to keep the economy going and so on. They just dug in their heels, shut down the economy, paid everybody not to work, etc. you'll recall. The political divisions did not heal, and they are still the same. And you have one camp advocating one thing, another camp advocating another thing, and the political differences are driving the policy, currently. And this is all in my view, of course. Okay, so you have these warring political factions. The media policy, as it has evolved in between these two warring political factions, that, like I said, the response at this point is all political. It has nothing to do with it has, let me put it this way, it has mostly to do with the political position. But the media people, what they decided to do for their own reasons and other reasons, the pressure they were receiving, is they increased the control over what's permissible to say on their various platforms. The rules vary in between platforms. Is in terms of this platform and not getting those other great shows that I mentioned available on TalkCast PDX canceled. There's a number of things that I simply cannot discuss in the terms of this podcast. For example, last week there was the 157th a randomized double-blind trial with a N, the number of participants, over 10,000 people, that came to a conclusion that backed up the other 156. But I can't mention what that conclusion is because it runs afoul of the what's allowable on this particular platform. There's been studies on mortality and hospitalization by subgroup, infection, hospitalization, and mortality by region. In other words, how is this country doing compared to that country, compared to this, by region. There have been a great number of studies on symptom severity and duration by subgroup, age, sex, or gender, whatever you want to call it. Comorbidities, et cetera, et cetera. There's been studies that indicate that there is a large rise in preclinical apparitions of other ailments. There have been a lot of in vitro cell studies. There have been, and most importantly, recently, they have come in with the pathology. A lot of people have died from a lot of various causes, and the more wealthy of the families have insisted on detailed autopsies, and they used the best pathological people in their area, and those people put together studies, and those were started to come out. And the response varies by country. What they do in Germany and Austria versus, differs from what they do in Italy, which versus, differs from what they do in Australia and Canada and the United States and so on. And it's all a huge confused mess. The most published and most senior immunologist in Germany came out and made a statement, and he said that in his opinion, the course of the pandemic and what to expect over the next year or two or even 5 is pretty well known at this point, principally because of the pathological studies that came out. And he talked in detail about his opinion on that. And I would, the only thing I'm going to quote him on is he said, quote, "We are going," and he's German, by the way, so he's speaking from Germany. And he said, quote, "We are going to flee this damn country because we are not going to be shot." And the way that he, quote, but the way that he used the term shot means forcibly vaccinated, is what he said. A senior Canadian pathologist, one of the guys that was involved in, doing some of these pathological results, speaking of the coordinated response to the pandemic, said, quote, "They dress themselves in the flag, demanding that only they can protect you from all of life's risks. It can't be done. I can tell you with categorical certainty, as a pathologist, death happens. Life is risky. Get used to it and live your life," unquote. But it creates a difficult situation. In my view, in most countries, particularly this country, and that's what I specialize in. It's my first language, growing up here. How do you resolve a dispute of that nature, where you have two political factions in different degrees of power in the legislature not being able to agree? And in our system, it devolves into the courts. And in that connection, the Supreme Court.
Hi, everyone. This is Justin McDonald, producer for the Bogdanich Perspective. We lost our audio at the moment. We're going to try to get him back. If you want to just hang tight, we will try to get him back as soon as possible.
Are you there? I'm still speaking. It shows
Okay,
that I
looks
am.
like you're back. Okay, thank you, Paul. Sorry that we lost you.
Where did I quit, or where did I cut out?
You were just talking something about the government, and you disappeared. So we thought you got cut off.
But do you remember what I was talking about?
I don't.
Well, to go back to it, we have a political disagreement on how to proceed with the pandemic response. That gets settled in every different country by different means. In our country, what that means is it goes to the Supreme Court. The difference in between the circuit courts arose in the Fifth and the Sixth Circuit. The way the Supreme Court works is each territory is assigned to a different justice. In this particular case, Justice Kavanaugh is the case manager. The court has agreed to accept the case. Justice Kavanaugh has set a deadline of 4:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, December 30th, 2021, which is this Thursday, for the Biden administration to submit its paperwork on the interrogatories. And then after that, the court is going to consider the matter. The court will probably consider the matter in the first week of January and render a decision by the end of January. And that will be the decision on to what extent, if any, of these mandates are constitutional. Like I said, it's different in every country. Our country is a constitutional republic. Britain is a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary system. Most of the other European countries are parliamentary systems. Canada and Australia, parliamentary systems. Some of these parliamentary systems have a Bill of Rights. Others do not. Australia does not. And it's arguable whether Australia or China is the most authoritarian nation in their pandemic response, but it's one of the two. And the only thing, they don't have a Bill of Rights. They have a parliamentary system, but no Bill of Rights. The Canadians have a Bill of Rights, but Prime Minister Trudeau has decided to suspend the Bill of Rights up in Canada. Britain, like I say, but it's a complicated situation. Our court could look at this in a variety of different ways. They could do a legalistic decision and confine the matter very narrowly to law and administrative power. That's on one end. On the other end of the spectrum, they could devolve to, what does it mean to be free? Do you have sovereignty over your own flesh? Is that a necessary precondition? Is that guaranteed by the Constitution to have some degree of sovereignty over your own body? I would point out that under our system of law and culture, if you're a person that suffers from some mental tic and you decide to eat salsa and chips as your main meal 3 times a day, every day, and for dessert you eat nothing but Twinkies, and you sit in your house and watch TV and do that for years, and you develop diabetes and develop other maladies and ruin and severely affect your health, they can't stop you. It's your body. You can do that. All right. And so depending on what tack they take has huge implications. If they say, for example, that the things are unconstitutional based on some definition of freedom, the one end of the spectrum, that leaves the corporations that did all these mandates in absence of clear direction responsible for adverse medical events, lost time at work, illegal firings, and so on. So this decision has huge implications. I would come back to the point that this situation is only possible because of 2 reasons. Our ability to print money, that's the first thing. The societal costs just were not taken into account. We closed whole industries. They said, we're going to go bankrupt, the airlines. No, you stopped everybody from flying, we're going to go bankrupt. They said, no problem. Wrote them a check and said, here, keep your planes maintained, pay your employees, do this, do that. Now, it's only they didn't have to balance the needs of the economy and the society against the response to the pandemic. They went with the printed money, and that compounded by the situation that we, the voters, have left the same people in charge for 30, 40 years in a row. Into 2 irreconcilable camps, and the decision is going to the court. I'm sure the court laments that they have to decide this. It's more properly a job of our political arm, but our political arm did not function, and so it's going to the Supreme Court, and I think that the results of that decision are going to be huge, and I think they're going to have huge market effects. I'm prevented from going into the particulars because these media platforms have their policies, and short of a Supreme Court decision, they're just doing whatever it is they do, and so I can't talk about the particulars. But we can look at where we are in the market, and let's go ahead and do that. And Justin, if you could please put up graph number 1. There it is. Okay, this is just our standard graph here. Runs from June 30th, 2021 through yesterday, which was Monday, December 27th. And in the beginning part of the year, prior to September 2nd, and this goes back all the way into January, but this graph only shows from June on, the Federal Reserve was keeping the stock market, in my opinion, again, but helping the stock market stay in a channel. And this channel was moving upwards at 30% a year. And that's what the Federal Reserve used to refer to, or still does, as the pandemic premium. In other words, increasing asset prices so that consumers have more money, makes more money available in the system, helps the economy while it's still recovering from this pandemic. But it turned out to be 30% a year. That's what that channel is. The middle of the channel is about 30% a year. And we were in that channel solid until September 2nd, 2021. Then it dropped out of the channel and it hit a low on October 4th. And then it came back up into the channel, and it was moving along the bottom of the channel. And then that drop, where it falls out of the channel, is the day after Thanksgiving, when they announced this Omicron variant. And then it, goes down, up, down, 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 and so on. And last week, when I spoke last week, it was at that point, the most recent point where it broke the 50-day moving average, which I believe is the green line there. That's where it was when I spoke last Tuesday, and I said that I thought that it was going to recover to greater than 4650, 4700, possibly 4800, somewhere between 48 and 4900. And indeed, as of yesterday, it has recovered the bottom of the channel. It closed the day yesterday at 4,791, and this is, of course, all measured on the S&P 500. It's down just a little bit today, 6 points or something, but it's still essentially at the bottom of the channel. If you go back to January 4th, which was the first trading day of 2021, and calculate the gain as of the end of the day yesterday from the beginning of the year, turns out to be 29.5%. 29.48, something, but I mean 29.5%. So roughly 30% a year. It's Tuesday. Counting today, there's only 3 trading days left to the end of the year. As I mentioned last week, the reason that I thought that it would do what it in fact did is everybody's interests, all your professional fund managers, all your retirement system managers, all your retail brokers, all your self-directed investors, all have an interest in closing it up at the end of the year. If you're somebody that invests other people's money, it increases your salary and your bonus. If you're in charge of a public entity, it makes it so that you can go in front of the legislature, your oversight board, or whatever it is, and crow about what a genius you are, and look how much better the fund is, this year compared to last. So everybody has an interest in seeing this thing close up, and I don't. If anything, I expect that it will. They'll try and contain the downside and possibly move it up into the middle of the channel in the last 2 trading days. But where it is right now is 47.85, and it closed yesterday at 47.91, so above 4,700. So what do you do? I'm concerned about what happens in January on a number of different bases. I would again say that the reason that the stock market performed like this is the same reason that we had the pandemic response that we did, is the same reason that the political parties are in 2 different trenches, with no man's land between them rather than no cooperation, and that's the ability to print money. And it facilitates all these problems, and I think that they're coming to a head. 2022, next year, is an election year. So that the pressure is going to be on the Federal Reserve to make sure that the economy is in good shape or improving, or conducive to an orderly election, let's put it that way, in between, call it June and November. So in the back half of the year, call it from July 1st, 3rd, and halfway through the 4th quarter, the institutional pressure on the Federal Reserve to make sure that the stock market is regular and high and all the rest of that stuff is going to be tremendous. So that only leaves the front part of the year. If there's money managers out there that are nervous, and I think there are, if in response to the way that the situation is developing in continental Europe and Britain, that causes asset shifts, which I think it will. If the market is to dip at all on any kind of concern, whether it's valuation, money flow, or whatever, that essentially has to be in the first part of the year, before July. Compound that with the Supreme Court decision that is expected by the end of January, which depends on what they do with it. But I mean, it's going to have huge implications for future liabilities of these large businesses. Either way they come down, it's going to have consequences. And if it comes down where these corporations put themselves in a position where they have to pay some of the expenses that were created to society, then they're going to have huge liabilities and their valuations are going to drop. So I would reiterate the same advice that I closed last show with, and that's there's only 2 trading days left, this year, not counting today, and then the year is over. But I mean, if I had, well, I already did this myself, but I'm just saying, if I had stocks that I could sell or transfer, tax free out of equities into just some stable vehicle, money market funds, or either cash, and do it without tax consequences if it was retirement money, I would do that and wait for this Supreme Court decision. Because I think if the market's going to drop, it's going to do it shortly after the first of the year. I'm reminded of 2007 moving into 2008. Huge drop. First 3 days. It opened on the third day of January in 2008, down 15%, never recovered, that kind of thing. And I think there's a possibility of that doing that again. And the more liquid assets that you have so that you can buy a dip like that, the better off you are. And, it depends on your age and so on. So consult with whomever does your trading in your portfolio for you, and think about the tax consequences and think about the timing. If you're involved in a fund, let's say you have, or your asset manager has you in a fund like Vanguard, a number of those funds, most of them probably, are what are called open-ended. And if you call him today and say, hey, I want to sell, what they do is they take your sell order today, but they put it in tomorrow's business. So what you're doing by asking them to liquefy assets for you is you're creating a contract for them to execute it on the next business day. Now, on the next business day, the market could open up 2% down, 5% down, 10% up, whatever. But it just, you're doing a contract for the following day. And I'm worried about the first trading day of January, which is Monday, January 4th this year. So if you're going to do that, do it today or tomorrow, and make sure with whomever that it's not a 2-day waiting period, but it's a 1-day waiting period if you're in a fund. But that would be my advice. I mean, if you've held a basket of stocks that has kept pace with the S&P 500 for the year, you're up 30%, a full third, right? 29.5%. And trying to ride that to 60% is greedy, quite frankly. So it depends on your situation, when your money was in the market and so on. But I would feel more comfortable about holding the cash until at least the Supreme Court decides that, and we can see what the implications are. And that would be my advice, but there's only a couple days left. What else would I say? For it to get to an even 30%, the S&P 500, it would have to, for the year, it would have to rise to 4,811 points. And it may do that, I think. But if it does that, it would be on Thursday, and just kind of a low volume, push the price up just so we get a good print close type of event, not a lot of volume. And it might go to 4,800 or maybe even a little past. And so anyway, let's just look at our portfolios for the week ended last Friday, which was an all-time high, by the way. Monday, yesterday, was an all-time high, but prior to that, the Friday before was the all-time high. And the S&P, as of last Friday, closed at 47.26, which was up over 100 points for the week, which is about 2.3%. And if you have one of these portfolios that we track, you should have gained $2,275. Our top 30s gained 3,362 and 3,013 respectively. So again, the large capitalization stocks outperformed the S&P because those two portfolios are just the top 30 stocks. If we look at our every sector, where we took all 11 sectors of the S&P and then just took the top 3 stocks in every sector, instead of returning 2,275, that one only returned 2,000. If we look at the performance of the individual sectors for the week, the only two that were down were real estate and utilities, but the others had, smaller gains compared to the top 30 portfolio. For example, in the top three by sector, our IT sector was only up 2.9%, whereas if you go to the top 30 list where you have a higher concentration, that was 3.4%. Consumers, communication services, the top three by sector actually outperformed. It was up 8.4% compared to 3%. But on balance, overall, the sectors, just the top 30 stocks outperformed a broader portfolio. My portfolio was flat, but I only have $20,000 invested. What did I do? Lost $24, made $37 back on the hedges, so I made $14 net. Nothing to speak of. And they're all hedged. They all expire on January 22nd. So the rest of my portfolio goes away January 22nd, which hopefully will be long enough for that Supreme Court decision. And if we look at our list of 54 stocks as we do here, only 3 stocks went up more than 5%. And those were Tesla. Elon Musk announced that he had sold enough stock and was not going to sell anymore. And Tesla, for the week, 1 week, mind you, was up 14.42%. It's up 57.6% since April. So I mean, huge move. If you'd have traded that stock based on Elon Musk only, his statements, hey, I'm going to sell stock, you sell. Hey, I'm done selling stock, you buy. You would have gained, just doing that trade alone, 20%. NVIDIA was up 6.6%. And NVIDIA since April is up 106%, just since April. And this is what it looks like when the whole market goes up 30% a year. But that's another one. Just like I say, up 106% since April, 6.6% for the week, which is a huge move. Boeing Aircraft up 6.02%, basically on the hope that they can get a plane in the air. And the Indonesians, the people that killed themselves in the 737 MAX, placed an order for more planes. I guess they have excess population down there or something. But on that news and continuing hope, its stock rose from 192 to 204, which is 6%. But that compares to 400. Which is what it was before the crashes, the plane crashes. There were another 3 stocks that were up more than 4%, but less than 5%. Broadcom, Netflix, and AT&T, 3 stocks, excuse me. There were 8 stocks that were up more than 3%, but less than 4%. Notable names in there: ConocoPhillips, Google, Microsoft, Disney, MasterCard, PayPal, Cisco, and Apple. So all the largest stocks, or 3 of the largest stocks, Apple, Microsoft, and Google, were all up more than 3%, but not quite 4%. ConocoPhillips was the leader in that group, up 3.8%. Google was up 3.7%. Microsoft was up 3.4%. And Apple was up a flat 3%. There were 7 stocks that were up 2%, but less than 3. Notable names in there: UPS, Nike, Comcast, Chevron, Home Depot, Adobe, and Visa. And so far, all the categories I've read, all the names are notable, and we're going from best performing to least. I would note, UPS was up 2.7, being the best. Visa was up 2.2, being the worst in that group. There were 9 stocks that went up more than 1%, but less than 2%. Notable names in there: United Healthcare, Procter & Gamble, ExxonMobil, Abbott Laboratories, Intel, Bank America, and Lowe's. So 7 of the 9. By sector, the oil sector did well. Financials, everybody was up more than 1% pretty much. There were 12 stocks that went up, but less than 1%. Notable names in there: Coca-Cola, Amazon, Walmart, Facebook, JP Morgan, Berkshire Hathaway, the financials, 3M Company, Honeywell, the industrial, Johnson & Johnson, one of the medical concerns. And then there were 9 stocks that were down, but less than 1%. Okay, so down in between 0 and 1%. And those included Philip Morris and Sherwin-Williams, Verizon Communications. Those are the only notable names out of the that group that fell, but fell less than 1%. The rest are real estate or utility companies. And then only 3 stocks out of our 54, which represent about the top 35 stocks plus some others. But for the 54 stocks, 42 were up, 12 were down, and only 3 down more than 1%. And Target fell 1% exactly. Pfizer fell 1.3%, and Costco fell 4.2%. And those were the only stocks out of these portfolios, which include the largest 35 stocks, that were down more than 1%. And by contrast, you had 6 stocks that went up more than 4.6%, and another 8 that went up more than 3 out of that group. So the large caps did very well. 2 trading days left, yeah. And I think that's going to be it for this shortened thing. I am going to say we did this last week. The Croatian term for Merry Christmas was Sretan Božić, which means Merry Christmas. And you can tell I'm not a native speaker because of the way I pronounce Sretan. It should be, the letter S and then a rolling R, but I can't do it. If I ever show up over there and speak to the locals, they're going to know I'm from somewhere else. But when you say Happy New Year, instead of Sretan, which means happy or good or glad, you have to change it to the feminine tense. So it's Sretna, and that's a little easier for me with that A ending. As Sreta Nova Goveda, Nova, new, and Goveda, year. So Sreta Nova Goveda, which means Happy New Year. And this has been the Bogdanich Perspective, TalkCast PDX, Tuesdays. Next Tuesday, we'll be opening up the new year, so join us next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Snow should be melted by then. City should be back open. And hope you had a good year. Happy New Year, and see you next Tuesday.
Hello.